Meanwhile, Ryan opened the needle box, took a deep breath, and performed acupuncture on Andrew Zeller as Cole waited for the ambulance to arrive. Ryan's hands moved quickly and skillfully. In a few moments, he had applied more than a dozen silver needles, all accurately hitting several acupuncture points on Andrew's chest.
It's amazing that he's so confident in his skill at such a young age.
It is. My boy is about the same age, but he only knows how to flirt and pick fights all day.
An older woman said with a rueful smile. Ryan smiled upon hearing the praise. He was used to being considered a young prodigy, but having his ego stroked never seemed to get old. Once he had finished placing the needles, he stood up and clasped his hands behind his back.
I've balanced the energy in his body. It should stop his condition from worsening for the time being.
There was no doubt that Ryan's technique made him look like an expert, but Andrew still seemed to be in pain. He convulsed on the floor, and everyone who had gathered around took a step back in shock. Ryan quickly bent over to feel Andrew's pulse, and his brow furrowed with surprise and worry. Judging from what he felt, Andrew's condition had actually worsened. After a round of careful diagnosis, Ryan knew that his acupuncture technique wasn't the cause, but he couldn't figure out what had made Andrew react so poorly.
Remove the needles. They won't do him any good.
Jacob said lightly as he walked over and knelt beside Andrew. He squatted down and placed one hand on Andrew's wrist, then pulled out the acupuncture needles one by one and returned them to Ryan.
You also know traditional medicine?
Ryan looked at Jacob with surprise. It was clear from the way he pulled out the needles that Jacob wasn't some random spectator. Someone who wasn't skilled in acupuncture wouldn't be able to remove them without blood, but Jacob took each one out with care and skill. He obviously had a lot of practice.
You two. How is Mr. Zeller?
The assistant asked, wringing her hands. She had never seen either young man before, and she didn't know if she could trust them completely. Jacob attempted to give her a reassuring smile.
Mr. Zeller's heart is placed differently from others. A normal person's heart is more toward the left side of their body, while his is on the right. That's all.
Yes, that's what his doctor said. Sir, is Mr. Zeller going to be okay?
He'll be fine until he can get to the hospital. A little acupuncture will do the trick.
Wait, how do you know that Mr. Zeller's heart is on the right?
His pulse is unusual.
Jacob took out his own needle bag that he always carried with him.
Are you kidding? How can you be sure?
Ryan scoffed. Surely this new acupuncturist had to be joking. There was no way to detect that sort of thing. Jacob ignored Ryan's question as he silently concentrated on his work. He focused on channeling the energy in his body as he inserted an impossibly fine needle. It quivered slightly, then stood straight up, and Jacob gently hit an acupressure point on Andrew's right side. Within a few more minutes, he had inserted 12 more needles and finished his treatment.
The 13 needle technique?
Ryan blurted out. He had been watching Jacob intently. Jacob nodded calmly.
Exactly. You're quite knowledgeable.
Ryan felt heat creeping into his face. Although he had been studying ancient medicine for a while, his grandfather had told him that there would always be someone else to learn from. He said that as a doctor he should be kind, help people in need, and let go of the desire to compare himself with others. However, because of his unique medical prowess, Ryan had always had a bit of a superiority complex. He hadn't truly paid attention to his grandfather's teachings until he met his match in Jacob.
I can see that you have great knowledge as well. I'm Ryan Tao, grandson of David Tao. And who are you?
Jacob slowly removed his acupuncture needles and stood up.
Just a med student.
Once the needles had been removed, Andrew coughed softly and opened his eyes, and his assistant helped him sit up very slowly. A trace of confusion flashed across his face when he realized he was sitting on the floor with a staring crowd surrounding him.
Mr. Zeller is all right now. The ambulance should be here any minute.
Ryan still hadn't taken his eyes off Jacob.
I really think we should meet up at my family's medicine shop sometime. When can you stop by?
I appreciate the invitation, but I have to respectfully decline.
What? Are you afraid we're better than you?
Jacob slowly wiped his needles clean and put them back into his bag.
A doctor should be kind. My grandfather always told me that as a doctor, your focus should always be on the people who are in need, not competition with others.
A wise philosophy.
Andrew said, and he gently took Jacob's hand.
Thank you for saving me, young man.
He continued, and gestured to his assistant to produce something from his wallet.
This is my business card. If you need me, this is how you can reach me.
Jacob took the business card with a smile.
That's very kind of you, Mr. Zeller. But I'm a doctor. This is my duty.
Where do you live? Perhaps I can visit you when I have time.
I'm just a student at the university, and my family isn't from Oakdale. I live in a dormitory right now, so you probably wouldn't want to visit me there.
I see. Haley, please prepare a suite for this young man in Parkview Terrace.
Jacob's expression froze. Parkview Terrace was an extremely exclusive housing development. Even though he had just become much richer due to Julian buying the emerald from him, he still didn't think he would be able to afford it long term.
Mr. Zeller, that is too generous of you. I was merely doing my duty as a doctor.
Andrew shook his head slowly.
Don't worry. I've got more properties than I know what to do with. Please think of it as a consultation fee for my treatment. It's the least I can do to repay you for saving my life.
Just then, the ambulance arrived, and medics rushed in with a stretcher.
Come see me at Nightdale Property Headquarters tomorrow and I'll arrange everything, young man.
Since Andrew had insisted, Jacob couldn't refuse.
Then thank you, Mr. Zeller. Because of your generosity, I'll offer you my services for free if you trust me to do so. From now on, I'll perform acupuncture once a week for you, as well as provide you with some traditional medicine. With ongoing treatment, I estimate that your heart disease can be cured within a month.
You really think you can cure me?
Heart disease is not necessarily a terminal illness, and it should be able to improve with proper techniques.
Then I accept. If you manage to cure my disease, I won't be able to thank you enough.
Mr. Zeller knew that he was suffering from congenital heart disease, and countless doctors had told him there was nothing they could do. Even if this young man's treatments did nothing, it was enough that he had stepped in and saved Andrew's life that day.
You're welcome, Mr. Zeller. We can begin your treatment starting next Monday.
Andrew nodded as he and Haley got into the ambulance.
What's your name, young man?
It's Jacob, yes, sir.
Then I'll call you Jacob if you don't mind. I'll arrange for your property tomorrow. Go to the headquarters and ask for Haley.
Andrew didn't need to tell Haley what to do. By the time he had finished speaking, she had already written down Jacob's phone number. At last, the ambulance whizzed away with a wail of its sirens. Jacob was confident that the older man would be fine, but he still needed to be examined just to be safe. Ryan came to stand next to Jacob and crossed his arms doubtfully.
This heart disease is congenital. Are you sure you can cure it?
If I say it can be cured, then it can be cured.
Then what kind of treatment are you planning to do?
Just acupuncture and traditional medicine?
That's it. It may help a little, but it can't cure heart disease. How do you expect to pull that off?
It's very simple. I use my body's vital energy to control the needle.
Vital energy?
Ryan gaped at him as if he had said that he was going to use unicorn tears. By that time, it was almost noon, and Jacob had planned to leave with Cole and others for lunch. He gave Ryan a cordial wave as he left, but didn't waste time on saying goodbye.
Wait, what do you mean by controlling the needle with vital energy?
Ryan asked. But Jacob was already gone. He took out his phone and dialed his grandfather's number. A short time later, in a luxurious private dining room, many fine dishes had been laid on the table, and bottles of wine were uncorked. Cole took a tall glass and filled it up. Then he handed it to Jacob. He kept the rest of the bottle for himself and raised it high.
Jacob, let me give you a toast,
he said with a grin. Without waiting for Jacob to speak, he raised the bottle and poured the wine straight into his mouth.
Hey, what's wrong with you? I feel like you're acting weird today.
Julian asked Cole. Jacob raised his glass and drank, but he too had the uncomfortable feeling that something was going on with Cole. Even Megan felt that the atmosphere was different. She looked at Jacob questioningly, only to see that Jacob appeared calm, like nothing was out of the ordinary. Cole continued his strange behavior by taking his bottle and sitting on the ground.
I was just in a car accident on the way here.
He said as if it was something casual that happened to him all the time.
What? Are you sure you're okay? The driver's side was smashed into pieces.
Cole gave a lopsided grin, as if the wine had already started to take effect. Everyone at the table's eyes snapped sharply to Cole at his proclamation. If the driver's side of his car truly had been smashed to pieces, he wouldn't have been sitting in front of them without a scratch on him.
Did you jump out of the window?
No, I was belted in. Cole, are you dead? Are we talking to a ghost right now?
Cole gave a wry smile and glanced at Jacob.
Well, I know that I'm lucky to still be here. Perhaps it's the crystal Jacob gave me that protected me.
Julian cast his memory back to the crystal that Jacob had bought the previous day and gave a small smile.
That's why you made a toast to Jacob then. Since it's so useful, you should give me one too, Jacob.
No problem. I'll give you as many as you want.
Cole fell silent, but he hadn't finished explaining the rest of the story of what happened to him during the accident. He had been driving through an intersection when a truck lost control and came straight toward him at a perpendicular angle. The driver's side of Cole's car was instantly crushed, and between the airbag and the crumpled door, Cole couldn't get out of the car. The driver of the truck evidently hadn't been wearing a seatbelt, and he came through the windshield of the truck upon impact. But when the ambulance and firefighters came to pull Cole out of the car, he was uninjured except for a few abrasions on his hands. The firefighters were amazed to find Cole alive, much less unharmed, although Cole was understandably in shock from the whole ordeal. They were certain that no one could have made it out of a crash like that in one piece. Cole was taken to the hospital anyway to make sure he hadn't suffered any internal injuries, and it was there that he suddenly remembered the crystal that Jacob had bought for him at the stall. He had kept it in his pocket since then. When he checked his pants, he found that it was still there, although its once brilliant color had turned gray and lost all of its luster. Its surface was spider-webbed with cracks, as if it had been broken in the accident instead of Cole. Even though the crystal was sold in an unassuming place, it had still been polished very carefully. No matter how bad the craftsmanship might have been, its condition couldn't have become that poor overnight. Cole recalled that Jacob appeared to have done something to the crystal before he gave it to him. It meant that Jacob must be some sort of practitioner of the supernatural. Cole figured that a person like that wouldn't want such a skill to be made public, so he thought it best not to probe any further. Meanwhile, at lunch, Jacob and Julian ate and drank their fill to celebrate the money they had both made by purchasing the raw emerald at the auction. As they were leaving, Julian hefted the large stone into his trunk with a smile.
Jacob, thank you again. I'll transfer the money to you soon.
The price of emeralds was on the rise, so the profit margin on emerald jewelry had shrunk accordingly. The gamble that Jacob had taken on a worthless-looking rock had actually ended up saving Julian a considerable amount of money, since he no longer had to absorb the costs of buying emeralds from a middleman. Jacob smiled back.
You're welcome. It's your luck.
Julian laughed and got in the car.
Thank you for your hospitality, Cole.
Jacob had nothing else planned after lunch, so he figured that he would just go back home.
What's the rush? I have a gift I want to give you.
A gift?
Jacob wasn't sure what occasion would warrant Cole giving him a gift, unless it was in thanks for the crystal. Cole took a key fob out of his pocket and handed it to Jacob.
I won't ask any questions about how you did it, but I know you saved me. These are the keys to the car I drove here today. Consider it a token of my gratitude.
Jacob looked at the key fob and smiled.
Then thank you, Cole.
Just as Cole thought, Jacob had instilled the crystal with a luck charm before giving it to him. Unfortunately, there was not much spiritual energy left in the crystal, as it could only be used once. All of its protective properties had been used up in the accident, so the crystal had become nothing more than a common stone. Before Cole left, Jacob thought for a moment and then patted him on the shoulder.
You need to convince your father to find someone to check on your house's feng shui. I think that's why your luck has been so terrible lately.
Cole looked puzzled, but since Jacob's crystal had saved his life, he decided not to take any chances. He had never been the type of person to believe in superstitions before, but he figured that at the very least, it couldn't do any harm.
I'll do my best. Thanks again, Jacob.
See you later, Cole. Be careful.
Jacob met Megan at the door of the restaurant, where a security guard led Jacob to the brand new sports car that Cole had parked in the garage. It was gleaming red and looked as though it had just been driven off the lot. Even the tires shone in the dim light of the parking garage.
It's so beautiful.
Megan exclaimed, and she trotted over to touch it. Jacob made his way to the car slowly, not believing his eyes. He knew that Cole had a lot of money, but he had never dreamed that he would offer him such a lavish gift. Not only was it a brand new car, but it was a limited edition. There were only about 10 of them in the world, and now one of them belonged to Jacob. In just a few days, Jacob had accumulated an unimaginable amount of money, a sports car, a new luxury home, and a beautiful girlfriend. It all felt like a dream that he would wake up from at any moment. Jacob buckled his seatbelt nervously and felt a flutter of excitement when he started the car with the press of a button. The engine roared as he peeled out of the parking garage and onto the road.
Jacob, everyone knows Cole's a rich and generous guy, but why did he give you such an expensive car?
Cole hasn't been very lucky these days. I bought a crystal for him as a good luck charm, and he survived that awful car accident. I guess he thinks that the crystal saved his life.
Are you kidding? A brand new sports car in exchange for a little crystal? I don't believe it.
Cole didn't seem like the type of person who bought into things easily. It sounded preposterous that he would believe something like that in the first place, much less put so much credit in the idea that he would give someone a car as a thank you gift.
There's nothing I can do to make you believe me,
Jacob said, still smiling. He couldn't tell her that he had inherited spiritual knowledge from his ancestor and had the ability to perform magic. After a few more minutes of driving, Megan spoke up again.
Jacob, I get the feeling that you've changed somehow.
I have? How?
He didn't feel like he had been behaving any differently, but he supposed that gaining mystical knowledge and mass wealth was bound to change a person. Perhaps that was what Megan noticed.
I can't put it into words. It's just a feeling I have.
Jacob smiled at her reassuringly.
I'm still the same Jacob as before. Where do you want to go next?
Anywhere you want. I don't have any other plans today.
Jacob decided to drive them to the mall. He had been using an old prepaid phone since he had started college. Given the recent upgrade in his finances, he decided it was time to upgrade his phone as well. He didn't become the type of person who blew all of their newfound wealth on frivolous things, but he also didn't need to live like a poor student anymore. He bought himself the newest model of phone and a new laptop, which he figured he could also use for his homework. Jacob had shopped enough for himself that day, but he was content to visit the other stores in the mall with Megan while she bought herself little accessories and things that caught her eye. They ate dinner together in the food court. By the time he drove Megan back to campus, it had already begun to get dark. Megan studied at Oakdale Business University, which was technically part of the same campus as the medical university that Jacob attended, so it was easy to drop her off after dates. Before she got out of the car, her phone rang, and she spoke for a few minutes before hanging up.
That was my parents. They want me to come back home tomorrow.
Megan's parents weren't rich like Julian's or Cole's, but she could afford to go home on breaks without having to get a summer job.
Go visit them and take it easy for a bit. I'll see you off tomorrow.
Megan stretched out her arms to hug him, and before he realized what was happening, she was kissing him deeply. He felt a little stunned for a moment. Still blushing, Megan opened the car door, and he eventually followed her out of the car. Jacob had always seen Megan as quite shy, so he never expected her to make a move on him the way that she just had. As Jacob walked Megan back to her dorm, he saw a young man loitering nearby. The stranger held a bouquet of roses, and he waved enthusiastically at Meg as they approached. There was a small group of people crowded around him. The affectionate glow immediately disappeared from her face, replaced by a sour expression.
What's wrong? An admirer?
Jacob teased. Megan nodded.
He's a spoiled nepotism baby. His family is super rich, but people like him always act like they've worked so hard when they've actually had everything handed to them. I don't like him, and I've told him so multiple times, but he won't take no for an answer.
Jacob smiled, put his arm around Megan's waist, and walked her toward the dorm. The man ran toward Megan excitedly, as if Jacob didn't even exist.
Megan, I've been waiting for you.
Tyler, how many times have I told you? I don't like you. Stop pestering me, okay?
Tyler's smile didn't waver for a moment.
I promise you'll like me if you just give me a chance. Please?
One of his hangers-on piped up from behind him.
Megan, just go on one date with him. Come on. Tyler has really put in a lot of effort. He's been waiting here for you forever.
Jacob couldn't help but laugh. These had a unique way of expressing their love. All of them were dressed up in fancy clothes, yet it was obvious that they were up to no good. Megan didn't seem as amused as Jacob by the whole situation, and she leveled him with a withering look. Jacob coughed and then reached out his hand.
Hello, my name is Jacob Yeh.
His other arm was wrapped conspicuously around Megan's waist. Tyler finally seemed to realize that Jacob was there, and his expression did a complete reversal in a split second. He looked grievously offended. Jacob had to resist the urge to laugh again.
Megan, who is this?
Jacob couldn't help the smug smile that made its way onto his face.
I'm Megan's new boyfriend.